In the summer of 1996, twin girls disappeared from their foster home in rural Utah. Only one body was ever found. The case was closed. But nearly 3 decades later, a real estate agent discovers a sealed room behind a false wall. And inside, evidence that one of the girls might have survived. What was behind the second door was never meant to be found. Subscribe for more real crime thriller stories based on chilling disappearances, buried secrets, and disturbing truths. April 2nd, 2024. Location: Paragon, Utah. A real estate agent prepping a long-abandoned foreclosure notices a foul odor in the basement laundry. When contractors pull back the drywall, they find an old wooden door bolted shut from the outside. Inside, a single cot, a moldy stuffed rabbit, decayed food cans, and a child's drawing, signed Kara, age 12. The shock? Kara was one of the twin girls declared dead in 1996, but this room had been lived in for at least a year after her disappearance. July 22nd, 1996. Location: Paragon, Utah. The Langley house sat at the edge of town like something time had let go of. A squat, sun-baked farmhouse framed by rusting fencing and sagebrush that clawed its way up through dry earth. In the backyard, a yellow rope swing hung limp from the cottonwood, creaking in the breeze like a voice trying to speak. It had been 8 days since Megan and Kara Griggs were last seen. 15-year-old twins, identical in almost every way. Except one had a mole beneath her eye and a quicker smile. People always said it was Megan who was louder, more impulsive, while Kara was the quiet one, the thinker. Both girls had been placed in foster care with Greg and Denise Langley the year before, after their birth mother was hospitalized for drug-induced psychosis. The placement was meant to be temporary. It ended in a burial. The town of Paragon had rallied hard during the first 72 hours. Foot searches, dogs, news coverage on Channel 4. Volunteers combed the high desert for miles, but nothing turned up until the culvert. It was a local boy who found her, out past Redwater Road, riding his bike through the dry wash near the state line. At first he thought it was a dead deer. What he saw instead was a shoe, pink with frayed Velcro, protruding from the reeds. The body was curled into itself, as if she'd laid down to sleep. Her face had decomposed beyond recognition in the heat, but dental records confirmed the truth. Megan. Only Megan. Kara was never found. Sheriff Harlan Brigsby stood under the awning of the Langley home, sweat soaking the rim of his hat. He was staring out at the backyard, where the cottonwood swung gently in the July heat. His deputy, Bessie Calder, emerged from the side door holding a clear evidence bag. "You're not gonna like this," she muttered. Inside the bag was a bloodied belt. Too narrow to be Greg Langley's, too long to be Denise's. Brigsby exhaled sharply through his nose. The Langley house had been combed twice already. No obvious signs of struggle, no forced entry, no ransom notes. The girls had simply vanished from their shared bedroom sometime after 2 a.m., when Denise claimed to have last checked on them. That was July 14th. Now, 8 days later, a decomposed body and a bloodied belt. "How the hell did we miss this?" Brigsby muttered. Calder looked at the house, a low sigh escaping her lips. Maybe we weren't supposed to find it right away. The Langley interrogation made national headlines by the end of that week. Greg Langley, a part-time mechanic and Sunday school teacher, maintained his innocence. But inconsistencies in his story piled up. His timeline didn't match phone records. He'd purchased camping supplies 2 days before the girls vanished, and worst of all, Megan's DNA was found inside his truck bed liner. Denise denied everything, claimed she'd been asleep the entire night. Still, it was enough. The case went to trial in October, but only Greg was convicted: kidnapping, second-degree murder, and desecration of remains. Denise walked. Publicly disgraced, she left Utah the following year. Greg died of a heart attack in prison in 2002. No new leads on Kara ever surfaced. No sightings, no evidence. Eventually, the town just stopped saying her name. The case file, number 96-0714, was marked closed in red ink. It included photos of both twins, school essays, fingerprints, and autopsy photos. Megan's death had been confirmed. Kara's was presumed. A gravestone was erected at St. Luke's Cemetery for both girls. Megan Rose Griggs, 1981 to 1996, Kara Elena. Griggs, 1981 to missing, presumed deceased. The second line always made Deputy Calder pause. Presumed. It was a technicality, but it gnawed at her in quiet moments. 27 years later, that presumption would come undone by a smell no one could ignore, a wall no one had reason to question, and a room no one was ever supposed to see. And behind that second basement door, Kara had left a message. I waited. No one came. April 2nd, 2024. Location, Paragon, Utah. The Langley property had been off the books for over 2 decades. Tied up in probate hell, bounced between state foreclosure lists and real estate holding companies until finally landing in the lap of someone who didn't know the history. Laurel Dunn, a regional agent for West Range Realty, had been assigned the listing 2 weeks prior. She hated going alone to places like this, old houses with shadows that didn't behave. She parked her sedan in the gravel pullout and stared up at the house. Same sun-baked walls, same warping shutters. The yellow swing out back still moved on its own, creaking in the windless air. There was no one else on this stretch of road. Just dust, brittle brush, and the mountains pressing down in the distance like witnesses. Laurel had been told it was a simple cleanup job. Inspect the interior, take photos for the digital listing, recommend what needed repair. The house had been boarded for years, but the contractor had already come by and popped off the plywood over the doors and windows. I'll be quick, she said aloud, as if the house might appreciate the reassurance. The front door creaked open with a sharp breath. Inside, the air was heavy, stale with mildew, rot, and the faint sweetness of something that didn't belong. Laurel stepped in cautiously, hand over her nose. The wallpaper had peeled in long strips. Water damage streaked the ceiling. The carpets were gone, probably removed in the early 2000s during some failed renovation attempt. But it wasn't the living room that bothered her. It was the smell. The smell came from the basement. The stairs groaned beneath her feet. She held her phone flashlight high, casting fractured beams across concrete and cobwebs. At the base of the steps was a laundry room. Washer and dryer rusted, floor stained from some long-ago flood. And then it hit her fully. A stench, not sewage, not mold, something sour, organic, like a decayed animal. She turned away, gagging into her elbow. Jesus! Behind the laundry room was a storage area, half-walled with cinder blocks and old shelving. The smell intensified near the back. Laurel moved slowly, scanning the space with narrowed eyes until her light hit the far wall and stopped. There was a seam, hairline, vertical, clean. She blinked and stepped closer. What looked like drywall had been painted to match the surrounding basement, but this section didn't have the same water damage. It was smoother, too smooth, and one panel near the floor had crumbled slightly, exposing wood underneath. Not just a wall, a door. She reached out, her fingers brushing the wood. It was damp, cold. Then she found the bolt, low to the ground, disguised under a strip of faux paneling. It turned easily, like no one had touched it in years. When she opened it, the smell exploded. The flashlight beam swept across a small room, maybe 6 feet by 10. No windows, no floor vent. A cot sat in the corner, rusted frames sagging in the middle. A pile of blankets matted with mildew. Rats had chewed through most of it. Beside the cot, a stuffed rabbit with one missing ear. Its fur was brown but soaked dark in places. Mold speckled its eye, and on the opposite wall, something had been scratched into the paint. I waited. No one came. Laurel stumbled backward, nearly slipping. Her chest was tight, her mouth dry. On a small wooden shelf, warped and leaning, was a child's drawing. Crayon, faded. Two stick-figure girls standing hand in hand. One had a red bow in her hair. Underneath, written in block letters, Megan plus Kara Dash. Age 12, Laurel dropped her phone. The police arrived within the hour. Crime scene tape stretched across the stairwell. Forensics marked every piece of bedding, every fragment of old food can, every scratch in the wall. Deputy Angela Ruiz took photos. The smell had triggered her gag reflex twice before she could even get her gloves on. Sheriff Thomas Bruckner, only a rookie back in '96, stared at the words on the wall for a long time. "We sealed the case," he muttered. "We buried both girls." Deputy Ruiz looked at him. "But we only found one." By nightfall, cadaver dogs had begun to alert to something beneath the cot. A partial jawbone was uncovered in the subfloor. Animal, not human. But then the forensics team lifted the cot's mattress and found two long golden hairs. DNA quickly matched to Kara Griggs. After 27 years of silence, the house had finally spoken. Kara had survived. She had lived in this sealed room, and she had waited for someone to come. April 3rd, 2024. Location: Paragon Police Evidence Locker. The lock buzzed as the reinforced steel door groaned open. The scent of oxidized metal, old paper, and archival dust drifted out like breath from a crypt. Edelyn Roy hadn't been down here in years. The shelving units were double-stacked, gray metal drawers labeled in fading marker, missing persons, 1980s, cold homicides, 1990s, unresolved evidence, vault. Yellowed masking tape curled at the corners. No windows, no cameras, just stillness and secrets. She found it on the third row, right where she'd told them to file it all those years ago. Case number 96-0714, Griggs, Megan, and Kara. Status closed, presumed deceased. Last reviewed October 17, 2002, E. Roy. Her initials still marked the file. Edelyn opened the drawer. Inside were 6 evidence bags, 1 faded folder, and 2 VHS tapes in brown sleeves marked with black Sharpie. INT, Langley Basement, and Griggs Memorial Service, media coverage. The cold storage tags had long since lost their adhesive. Dust clung to every seal. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted the bag labeled Number 947, Megan's backpack, recovered July 1996. The contents hadn't changed. Spiral notebook, pink eraser, a worn copy of Where the Red Fern Grows. But something made Edelyn pause. Inside the spiral notebook were doodles, hearts, a tree, a small sketch of 2 stick figures under a moon. And below that, a name written in all caps. Kara was here, July 17th, 1996. That was 3 days after Megan's body had been found. "Something's wrong with this file," Edelyn told Sheriff Bruckner. They were seated in the admin bullpen upstairs, surrounded by humming fluorescent lights and the low murmur of officers processing paperwork. Bruckner rubbed his forehead. "I don't doubt it. We had a hell of a time getting DNA samples from the mattress in that sealed room. But the lab confirmed it. Kara's hair. That room was lived in." Edelyn nodded. "Which means everything we believed about the timeline is flawed." Bruckner gestured to the manila file spread across the table. The medical examiner back in 1996 pinned Megan's death around July 15th. Give or take 12 hours. Langley was arrested a week later. Said he snapped. Never admitted to killing Kara. Claimed he didn't remember. "But he never said she got away either," Edelyn said. "And now we know Kara was alive, at least as of July 17th. She pulled the copy of the diary page Laurel Dunn had photographed. It showed a simple entry in pencil. "It's quiet again. He brought the beans today. I hate beans. I asked for Megan and he hit the wall." Date: July 19th, 1996. Edelyn tapped it. She was alive at least 5 days after her sister's death. That's not a one-night double homicide. That's prolonged captivity. Bruckner leaned forward. "Are you saying Langley kept one twin alive after killing the other?" "No," Edelyn said slowly. "I'm saying someone else did." Back in the evidence room, she reviewed each item from the Langley property catalogued in July 1996. The inventory seemed thorough, until she got to bag number 953, a belt with possible bloodstains, tagged and logged but never analyzed, and bag number 958, a crayon drawing labeled "Found in Crawl Space." It was a second stick figure sketch, nearly identical to the one in the newly discovered room. The difference: this one had only one girl drawn. The other figure was crossed out in red. That night, Edelyn sat in her home office watching the VHS tape labeled INT, Langley Basement. The grainy footage had been captured by an officer's handheld camera in 1996. It showed the same laundry room, the same concrete slab, but back then, there was no indication of a false wall. Or was there? At the 30-minute mark, the camera panned past the far wall where the second room had now been discovered. The light flickered, then paused briefly, and there it was, a hairline crack. Just for a second. Edelyn froze the frame. Someone had built that wall after the original crime scene sweep. The implications were devastating. Either investigators had missed it, or someone had returned later to create it. Either way, Kara hadn't been murdered in 1996. She'd been imprisoned, and someone had made sure she would never be found. April 4th, 2024. Location: Paragon Police Archives. Edelyn Roy sat alone at the long oak table beneath the buzzing fluorescence of the Paragon Archives room. In front of her was a file box labeled in thick, faded marker. Langley, Property Investigation, 1996 to 1998. It was heavier than expected. She lifted the lid and was hit with the smell of old paper, mildew, and something else. Something more metallic. Rust, maybe. Or dried blood memory. She wasn't sure what she was hoping to find. The case had been closed for decades. But something was wrong with the official timeline. Kara Griggs hadn't just survived Megan's murder. She'd remained captive, somewhere close, somewhere hidden. And that second basement door had never been in the original blueprints. The original property survey was in the bottom of the file. Black and white diagrams of the Langley farmhouse, dated 1985. Basement marked as unfinished laundry and storage. One stairwell. No mention of internal partitioning. Then she found the 1997 fire marshal report. Apparently, in January of that year, neighbors had complained of chemical odors from the Langley property. Fire crews had investigated. The report included photos. In one grainy Polaroid, the basement wall had already been reinforced with what looked like fresh drywall. The report noted possible black mold behind the washer and recommended sealed containment. There was no mention of the odor source ever being found. A notation in the margin caught her eye, referred to county health, declined inspection. Owner claimed personal repairs in progress. Owner, Denise Langley. Greg was already in custody, so someone had returned and started sealing up the wall, piece by piece. The next item was a photo, dated March 1998. It showed the outside of the Langley house during a county auction. The photographer had captured the side yard, with Greg Langley's old truck half buried in weeds, and in the background, barely visible, a man on a ladder, fixing the basement window frame. Edelyn zoomed in using her phone. The image pixelated into oblivion, but she could still make out the logo on his sweatshirt. Knowles Contracting, Paragon, UT. Her blood turned to ice. She had heard that name before. At the sheriff's office, she pulled the business license registry from the late 90s. There it was. R. Knowles Home Repair and Demolition. Licensed 1994 to 2005. Owner, Roger Knowles. Address, 1129 Juniper Ridge, Paragon, UT. Still local. She cross-checked it against county work permits. Sure enough, in 2004, 8 years after the Griggs twins disappeared, Knowles had filed a limited foundation repair and structural remediation permit for 1746 Morris Lane, the Langley House. A structure no one was supposed to touch anymore. A structure that now had a sealed secondary room. The next morning she drove to Juniper Ridge. The Knowles house was a single-story ranch with an overgrown lawn and a sagging carport. Wind chimes made slow, lazy turns in the still air. A black mailbox with peeling numbers sat crooked near the driveway. She knocked. The man who opened the door was in his 70s, heavy-set, wearing gray suspenders and a white undershirt. Liver spots patterned his arms. His eyes were glassy, but alert. "Mr. Knowles?" she asked. He nodded. "I'm Edelyn Roy, former detective. I'd like to ask you about some contracting work you did at a property back in 2004, 1746 Morris Lane." His eyes flickered. "That place?" "Yes. I already told the other one everything," he said. "Years ago." "Who was the other one?" she asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he motioned her inside. The interior of the house smelled of tobacco and lemon oil. A cuckoo clock ticked softly above the mantel. On the coffee table sat a neat row of VHS tapes labeled in thick marker. KG, Tape 1. KG, Tape 2. Tape 12. Tape 19. Edelyn picked one up. "Is this—" Knowles looked away. She was smart, real smart, loved biology, kept wanting to study. "You filmed her?" She didn't want to be seen. Said it helped to record her voice and read aloud. Said she'd get to college if she practiced enough. I gave her the tape so she could hear herself. "Where is she now?" He didn't answer. "Is Kara Griggs still alive?" His hands trembled slightly. "She was a child," he muttered. "And no one else came. They said she was dead. They closed the file. The girl never even screamed." "Who told you to fix the wall, Roger?" "She asked me to seal it. Said the other man scared her. Said she didn't want to go back. I just gave her what she needed. Food, books. She wanted quiet." Edelyn stared at him. "So you built the room, kept her alive, hid her from everyone." He looked down at his hands. "I thought I was helping." She left with 3 of the tapes, and a growing sense that Kara Griggs hadn't just been a prisoner. She had been groomed, shaped, kept, and she may not have been alone. April 5th, 2024. Location, Paragon, Utah. The tape whirred softly inside the machine, that old analog hum that once filled living rooms and school projectors in the lonely hours of forgotten afternoons. Edelyn sat in the cold silence of the evidence viewing room, a legal pad resting on her knee, the flickering image projected on a small, boxy screen. Tape 1 was dated September 18, 1999, 3 years after Kara Griggs was presumed dead. The screen brightened, grainy, gray-tinted. A girl sat cross-legged on a thin mattress, pale arms, hollow cheeks. Her hair was longer now, pulled back in a ponytail, and her voice sounded older than 12, though still uncertain, still careful. "Today I finished Unit 6, Cell Respiration and Mitochondria," she said, eyes not meeting the lens. "Mr. R says I'm on pace for sophomore benchmarks." She hesitated. "He says if I keep going like this, I'll get into college early." Edelyn pressed pause. Her pen trembled slightly in her hand. Mr. R. That night, she revisited Kara's recovered diary pages. Scanned and enhanced by forensics, the journal had water damage and torn edges. but certain phrases were still legible. R says I shouldn't be sad, that Megan was holding me back. He brings books. They smell like him, coffee and wood. R wears the green sweater when he's proud of me. He touched my hair today. Said he wishes I'd been his real daughter. Edelyn's stomach churned. The language wasn't Kara's. It was what had been fed to her. This man, whoever R was, had not just kept her alive. He had shaped her, controlled her, rewritten her world. She went back to Knowles. You said she was afraid of another man, she demanded. Who? Roger Knowles sat in his recliner, eyes fixed on the dark television. I never saw him. She never gave me a name, only called him the first one. Said he hurt her sister, said he used to bring the food, but he didn't like books. Knowles looked at her, blinking. I gave her books. That's all. You gave her more than that. He didn't argue. She ever mention what R stood for? Edelyn asked. A long pause, then, she once said it was for Ryder, but I think that was a lie. Or a code. The forensics team re-examined the contractor permit from 2004. The name on the paperwork? R. Knowles. But something stood out. The signature didn't match the one on Knowles' official license paperwork from 1996. Different slant, different pressure. Forgery? Or had someone else used his name to authorize the wall's construction? Back at the department, Edelyn pulled every foster placement record involving the Griggs twins from 1990 to 1996. One name appeared 3 times, once as a temp placement supervisor, once as a volunteer driver, once as a substitute counselor during a 1995 behavioral assessment. Richard Eames. Age, 51 in 1996. Former youth program contractor. No arrest record. Quiet. No family. Lived on the edge of Paragon until he sold his home in late 2003 and vanished. She pulled his personnel file. Photo attached. Gray suit, striped tie, neutral smile. A note written in Kara's diary returned to her mind. He wears the green sweater when he's proud. In Eames's photo, a green crew neck peeks from beneath the lapel of his coat. Edelyn drove to the last known address. The house was gone. Leveled a decade ago after a gas leak. The property now held a vape shop and a coin laundry, but the property record from 2003 showed an unusual transaction. It hadn't been sold through the open market. It had been gifted to a non-profit shell company called Ryder Educational Trust. There it was again. Ryder. It wasn't a name Kara had invented. It was something she'd heard, repeated, and believed in. That night, she returned to tape 5. Kara sat curled under a blanket, speaking softer now, slower. Today I missed the answer to the mitosis question. Mr. R made me rewrite the whole chapter. He says if I start slipping, the world will forget I was ever special. He says Megan was weak, that I'm not. He says the world above is ugly, but this room is clean, pure, quiet. Then her voice changed. He says one day, I'll be able to go back, but only if I'm ready. At 2:12 a.m., Edelyn scribbled a single sentence across her legal pad. She was being conditioned to believe captivity was a reward. And whoever R was, he hadn't just built a prison. He had built a curriculum. April 6th, 2024. Location, Paragon, Utah. The morning sun hadn't fully crested the ridgeline when Edelyn Roy stood once again at the back of the Langley property, facing the now famous false wall. The crime scene tape had been removed, replaced by heavy-duty plywood and a padlock from the forensic team. But it still smelled. Even beneath spring air and disinfectant, something lingered in the dirt, the wood, the grout. Not just decay, memory. She had brought a printout from the county permit office, the 2004 contractor authorization, R. Knowles, filed June 3rd. But the date didn't line up. The actual permit had been entered weeks after the original request, and the inspection had been mysteriously marked waived. Someone pushed this through fast, she muttered. kneeling near the rebar reinforcement added under the wall, and someone signed it with Knowles's name. Not Roger's handwriting, but someone who had access and motive. Back at the station, she reviewed Kara's diary fragments again. The entries from late 1997 through mid-1998 were increasingly disjointed. But one repeated phrase stood out. He's back again. The one who smells like paint thinner. The man with boots, not like R. The other one. In the margins of one page, scribbled vertically, him again. The one who made Megan cry. This wasn't R. This was someone else. It sent Edelyn back to the old interview transcripts, specifically Denise Langley's statements after Greg's arrest. The interview had never been fully digitized, but the paper copy in the archive had a critical paragraph that had been largely dismissed at the time. I didn't like that man Greg brought around. Said he was helping fix up the crawl space. Always smelled like paint. Wore those thick black boots, the kind that scuff up your linoleum. Didn't say much. When asked to name him, Denise claimed she never learned it. Said Greg called him the Runner. In 1996, a man like that could have blended into construction crews, temp labor, or odd jobs employment records. Edelyn called dispatch and requested the full list of maintenance contractors tied to the Langley residence between 1995 and 2000. Only 4 names appeared. 3 were vetted, clean. The 4th? Earl Reidner, contracted in 1995 for electrical and drywall patchwork. No known certifications, paid in cash. Last known address, Canyon Ridge Trailer Park. A background check returned a single traffic citation in '94, and then a total vanishing act. No employment, no utilities, no tax filings. He'd evaporated, but the name Ridner sparked something else. R-I-D-N-E-R Ryder. That night, Laurel Dunn called Edelyn. I was going through the attic again, cleaning for the listing photos. A pause. There's something up here. You need to come see it. The attic space was a crawl-in, a triangle of exposed beams and brittle insulation. Laurel knelt beside an old trunk, pushed deep into the eaves. Inside, yellowed notebooks, worn textbooks with biology and algebra tabs, and a shoebox filled with cassette tapes. Each tape had a label, all written in childlike block lettering. Mr. R's Lessons, 1997. Spelling Tests, Alone Day. Reward Tape, 100%, Special Day. One was labeled only, Voices Through the Floor. They played it in the forensic audio lab. The static-heavy recording began with a child whispering, "Can anyone hear me?" Then nothing for 20 seconds. Then the sound of footsteps overhead. Muffled movement. A female voice. "Mom, can you hear me?" And then, Kara, I think you're underneath the floor." The voice was faint, frightened, teenage, young. Another child, maybe from a different family, a foster girl or... Then came a low male voice. Didn't I say no talking through the vents? A door slams. The tape ends. Kara hadn't been alone. For at least part of her captivity. Someone else had been upstairs. And now Edelyn had a name. A link. Earl Ridner. The second visitor. The man who re-entered the house under a fake contractor name. And the one who may have taken Kara, or someone else, deeper. The silence that followed was crushing. Because Earl Ridner didn't exist in any system after 2003, but someone with his face did. A gas station security camera from last week, 200 miles away in Colorado. A man buying canned food, duct tape, and adult diapers. The timestamp read, 4:23 a.m. The clerk described him as polite, wore thick black boots, paid in cash, and he left behind a single receipt for 2 toothbrushes. April 7th, 2024. Location, Paragon Police Department, Digital Evidence Unit. The VHS tape arrived in a clear evidence bag marked with a new tag, 2024-0471. Kara Griggs Recovery, Basement, Analog media. Item 3. Edelin stood behind the forensic technician as he fed the tape into the digitization console, a quiet tension filling the room like the moment before a storm hits. The screen flickered, lines scrolling, a blue timestamp blinking in the corner, December 11th, 1999. 8:14 a.m. Then, static. And a girl's voice. Kara sat in the center of the frame, legs folded, holding a biology textbook in her lap. The room looked the same, small cot, dim light bulb above, the same crude shelves filled with binders and canned food. But she looked older, taller, thinner, her cheekbones more defined, her voice less uncertain than in earlier tapes. "This is lesson 7, she said quietly. "Photosynthesis and cellular respiration review for advanced assessment." Then, off camera, a voice responded, "Good. Keep your posture straight. Speak clearly." A pause. "Remember what we talked about. How the admissions committee will want to see confidence. Bright girls speak with certainty." Kara nodded, straightening her spine. Photosynthesis occurs in the chloroplasts of plant cells, where sunlight is converted. The video continued for 3 minutes before something changed. Kara faltered mid-sentence. Her voice wavered. "Converted to glucose and oxygen through the..." She paused. "Can I stop? My throat hurts." A beat of silence. Then the man's voice, sharper. "Excuses lead to mediocrity. Start again from the top." Her shoulders slumped, but she complied. "Photosynthesis occurs in the chloroplasts." Edelin turned away from the screen. The technician muted the audio but kept the footage rolling. Kara's lips moved in silence. Her eyes flicked to the side, toward the door, then downward. "There," the tech said suddenly. He rewound 5 seconds, paused the frame. Right behind her, on the chair. A backpack, purple, frayed near the zipper. A faded smiley face iron-on patch barely hanging on. They all knew it. The same one found in the sealed basement a week ago. The one Kara took with her on her last morning walk in 1996. But what truly arrested them wasn't the backpack. It was what sat beside it. A lunchbox. Another lunchbox. Different from the one found in the Langley house. Red with a Rugrats sticker, aged and peeling. The forensic team checked old school records. The sticker belonged to another girl, Melanie Rivas, age 11. Went missing from the Paragon foster system in 1998. Melanie had been written off as a runaway. Found no evidence. Case never linked to the Griggs twins. Until now. Edelin pulled the Rivas file from the cabinet like it might bite her. The police report was brief. Melanie had left the care of a foster home during a grocery trip. Slipped away while the foster parent was inside. No signs of struggle, just gone. But there was one note in the file. History of academic overachievement. High test scores. Frequent trips to school counselor. Reported anxiety over grades. A pattern. Melanie had been just like Kara, a girl who needed to be perfect. Tape 3 added another layer. Same room. Kara again, this time reading aloud from a psychology text. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, she recited. Behind her, a shadow moved. A figure, not the man from previous tapes, taller, bulkier, and then a voice Edelin had never heard before, deeper, rougher. "Time to clean up, little Miss Harvard." Kara flinched. The camera tilted. The frame shifted. A scuffle off screen, then static. They froze the last clear frame of the man's silhouette. Forensics enhanced the shot. Adjusted light curves. Increased clarity. And then they saw it. A patch on his jacket. Faded but legible. Ridner drywall in demo. "That's our second man," Edelin whispered. "That's him. Ridner wasn't just a visitor. He was part of this." Sheriff Bruckner nodded grimly. And if he was smart enough to build a second room, he might have built another. Later that night, a call came in from Colorado State Police. A gas station security camera had been flagged by facial recognition. A man matching Earl Ridner's file. In the background of the footage, a girl, maybe 25 years old, hood up, head down, carrying a backpack that looked like it belonged in 1999. The timestamp, 4:23 a.m., April 3rd, 2024, just 4 days ago. April 8th, 2024. Location, Paragon, Utah. The morning fog hung thick over Paragon as Edelyn Roy pulled into the cracked driveway of 1129 Juniper Ridge, Roger Knowles' house. The place looked like it had exhaled its last breath years ago. Paint peeling in long strips, mailbox crooked on its post, and a sun-bleached garden gnome leaning sideways by the stoop. Roger met her at the door without a word, as if he'd been expecting her. "You still have the tapes?" she asked. He nodded once. "Most of them." She followed him inside. The living room was unchanged, still stale with tobacco and old books. But today, the air felt different. Not heavier, sharper, like the past had clawed its way up from the floorboards and was watching. Roger walked to a locked cabinet near the hallway. The key shook in his hand as he opened it. Inside, a cardboard box marked KG, supplemental. He set it on the coffee table. "I didn't mean harm," he murmured. "You have to understand that." "I'm trying," Edelyn said softly. "But you need to be honest with me now. No more fragments. What did you do after Langley went to prison?" Roger sat back slowly, hands on his knees. "I didn't know Kara was still there. Not at first. I thought the whole house was empty after the arrest. I came to check on some unpaid labor Greg owed me. He was supposed to pay me cash for work I'd done on the floor joists. I came through the back basement entrance." "You broke in?" He shrugged. No one was living there. It wasn't locked. Place was half abandoned. He looked up at her, eyes watery. She was already in the crawlspace room, locked in, sleeping on the cot, looked like a ghost. Edelyn leaned forward. "And what did you do?" "I brought her food the next day. She was too scared to come out. Said the other man, the one she called R, would come back and punish her if she left. Said she wasn't allowed to go upstairs anymore." Roger rubbed his face. "She told me Megan was gone. Said she was the better one, that she was the project now." She didn't cry. She just asked if I'd bring her books. Edelyn opened the box. More notebooks, graded worksheets, journals with gold stars taped to the corners. A math packet labeled Sat Prep, 2002. One notebook was particularly thick. It was a reward log. 9/18. Scored 100% on biotest. Reward, half-hour music. 10th of February, perfect English essay. Reward, pink nail polish. 11/14, spelling quiz failed. Punishment, silence. Dozens of entries, dozens of incentives. A reward and punishment system so deeply ingrained it resembled conditioning. "You built this system with her," Edelyn said, voice low. "You reinforced it." Roger shook his head. "Numbery already started it. I just kept her going. I thought if she kept learning, if she passed enough benchmarks, maybe he'd let her out." That's what she believed. "Who was he?" Edelyn asked. "The other man. Not Langley. Not you." Roger hesitated. She only ever called him R, or the writer. She said he wore boots. That he knew how to make people disappear. She thought he was watching her even when he wasn't there. Edelyn's fingers tightened on the notebook. "You ever see him?" "Twice. First time he showed up while I was delivering groceries. He didn't say a word. Just stood there watching. Then he left. Next day, Kara was crying. She said I wasn't supposed to be there when R came, that it would confuse the lesson plan. And the second time, Roger's eyes darkened. 2003. I'd stopped coming around for a while, tried to pull away. I came back to drop off some books, found the room empty. No Kara, no cot. Just a note taped to the door. He reached into the box and pulled out a torn scrap of yellow paper. Edelyn unfolded it slowly, written in tight block letters. The curriculum has advanced. Do not interfere. Later that afternoon, the forensic team scoured the Knowles property. Under the floorboards of the detached garage, they uncovered a narrow trench lined with plywood and insulation. A makeshift bunker. Inside, a space heater, a cot, one stained pillow, a stack of college prep guides dated 2004 to 2006, a child's sweater, size medium, with the initials MR stitched into the tag. Melanie Rivas. She was here, Edelyn said. After Kara. Sheriff Bruckner's jaw was set. That makes 2 girls now, both gifted, both in the system, both vanished between 96 and 99, and both connected to men who believed in building something, some system, some delusional school, Edelyn said. She turned to Roger. Kara wasn't just a survivor. She was an experiment, and I think there were more. At 6:17 p.m., a call came in from a tech at Colorado State Police. The man from the gas station? Earl Ridner. Aged facial recognition confirmed a 94% match. But it was the girl they focused on now. The enhancement of her backpack revealed something chilling. A stitched name, hand-sewn in purple thread, just above the zipper seam. Kara. April 9th, 2024. Location: Elkhorn Valley, Colorado. The cabin sat deep in the hills outside Elkhorn Valley, a quiet stretch of alpine trees and private, unpaved roads where neighbors were scarce and land was cheap. No mailboxes, no cell service. Just the sound of wind cutting through pine needles and a sagging roofline swallowed by shade. Colorado State Police had tracked the purchase back to Earl Ridner, under the alias Harold Reese, paid in cash through a shell company registered in Nevada. The deed dated back to 2009, the electric bill, under a name that didn't exist. But the cabin wasn't empty. A tan Honda Accord, Urageb, Rosanna Aito Semen, Parkolta Raktar Mellet. Inside the car, they found a receipt from the gas station in Paragon, Utah. Same timestamp, same items, 2 toothbrushes. By the time Edelyn arrived on scene, the forensic team was already moving with quiet urgency. The front of the cabin was simple, wood-paneled, dusty, filled with the smell of mold and pine. No photos, no TV, just a table, 2 chairs, a mattress on the floor, and dozens of notebooks stacked in milk crates. Each notebook was labeled in the same clean handwriting. Independent Study, KG. Lesson Reinforcement, R. Physical Discipline Log, 2015 to 2016. It was Kara's writing, and someone else's corrections, in red pen. On the desk sat a list of chores, tidy rows. Beneath it, a sentence in ink. Earn your future. You're almost ready. But it was the shed that mattered. On the surface, it looked like a tool shed. Lawnmower, rake, empty gas can. But something was wrong with the floor. It echoed when they stepped on it. They pulled it up. Beneath, a wooden trap door, reinforced, locked from the outside. When the team pried it open, the scent that rose was unmistakable. Old stone, damp rot, and time. A narrow staircase led down into a hidden basement. Edelyn followed the officers down, flashlight beams bouncing across the stone walls. This hadn't been part of the original cabin design. This was retrofitted. Reinforced, a bunker. The space was smaller than the Langley basement, 8 by 10. No windows, just a narrow ventilation shaft lined with filters and duct tape. A small desk, a cot, a chemical toilet, a crate with dry food. And on the floor, a worn-out purple hoodie folded into a pillow. The initials were stitched inside the collar. KG on the wall, a laminated poster had been pinned with thumbtacks. College Entrance Strategy. Year 2, 1025. Maintain academic discipline, review practice essays nightly, remain isolated whilst focus reward, reintegration failure, remediation. And beside it, a drawing in crayon. Two girls, holding hands, one with a ribbon in her hair, the other with a line drawn through her head. There was more. Behind the plywood paneling near the back wall, the team uncovered a hidden compartment. Inside, a sealed plastic tote marked inactive. They opened it. It contained bones. Small, curled, partially decomposed. Alongside them, a cloth bracelet, pink and white, with beads that spelled MELANIE. Silence fell across the room. Adeline crouched near the edge of the tote, hand covering her mouth. "She didn't survive," she whispered. "He moved Kara here and buried Melanie with the curriculum." Sheriff Bruckner radioed it in. "I want everything tagged. No one moves anything until we process the whole damn site." Outside, Adeline stepped away from the shed and stared into the trees. There was no sound, no birdsong, no voices, just the faint clicking of crime scene cameras, and the thought that Kara Griggs had lived, studied, survived, inside one prison after another. That every time she'd been moved, it hadn't been a rescue. It had been a promotion. The curriculum advanced, the reward system refined, and Melanie? She didn't pass. An hour later, a highway patrolman reported a sighting. A girl matching Kara's current description, slender, mid-30s, long hair in a braid, had been seen walking the shoulder of Route 12, 40 minutes south, wearing a hoodie and carrying a backpack. She'd been alone. The witness offered her a ride. She declined, said she was almost home, and kept walking. April 10th, 2024. Location: Paragon, Utah. Denver, Colorado. The truth unraveled like dry thread. Adeline Roy sat in a Denver records room, the kind where cases go to be forgotten. Thin manila files, faded carbon copies, paper trails nobody had touched since the Clinton administration. Across from her, an assistant from Colorado Child Welfare placed 3 folders on the table, each marked in red. Melanie Rivas. Missing 1998 Andrea Myers. Missing 2001. Talia Venn. Missing 2004. All 3 girls had been under state care. All had high academic aptitude scores. All had prior contact with a mobile education consultant named Harold Reese, an alias for Earl Ridner. None of the girls were ever seen again, until Melanie's bones, until Kara walked out of the past, carrying decades of captivity stitched into her mind like homework. Adeline flipped through the Rivas file first. Melanie had been labeled a runaway. Her foster parent claimed she had been withdrawn and hyper-focused on homework. She carried a planner everywhere, lined her drawers with reward charts and gold stars, just like Kara. Each girl, Adeline realized, had been conditioned before the abduction. They weren't just kidnapped, she whispered. They were recruited. That theory sharpened when the FBI behavioral team returned a summary of Kara's notebooks. A disturbing pattern emerged. Kara's lesson reflections weren't academic. They were psychological. Mr. R says I can't go back until I'm better than I was. The others didn't study hard enough. They failed the trial. If I reach Unit 20, I'll be eligible to apply for Sunlight. Sunlight, as if it were something earned. Sheriff Bruckner called from Paragon with news. They'd found paper enrollment records from 1995 buried in an old high school storage room. A man named Richard Eames had briefly substituted for 2 weeks at West Hollow Elementary. No real credentials, no digital footprint, but his handwriting matched the red pen corrections in Kara's notebooks. Eames had vanished in 2005. No credit cards, no license renewal, no address. But they now believed Eames, Ridner, and R were not 3 people. They were 2. Eames was the mind, the educator. Ridner was the muscle, the enforcer. Together they built a system. Edelyn stood in front of a whiteboard in the Denver field office, tracing a line between the girls. Kara Griggs, Melanie Rivas, Andrea Myers, Talia Venn. At the center of the diagram, a red circle marked Project Rider. The FBI's database finally returned something usable. In 2000, Ridner had applied for a grant under the name Harold Reese for a homeschooling initiative targeting gifted wards of the state. The grant was denied, but the application revealed key insight. The public school system is failing students of exceptional intelligence. With a dedicated behavioral incentive model and academic immersion, these minds can be shaped into something better, free from distractions, diluted curriculums, and emotional clutter. I offer results through isolation and reinforcement. Signed, H. Reese. They had created a shadow school, an ideological cult disguised as a curriculum. Gifted girls, no guardians, chosen for their fragility, their perfectionism, their silence. Each was given a number. Each was promised a future. Each was broken when she failed to meet the mark. But only one survived. Only Kara reached the final level. Only Kara had moved from the Langley basement to the garage crawl space, to the Colorado bunker. Each one more refined, each one further from the world. At 9:13 p.m., a security camera in Glenwood Springs captured a woman walking alone, wearing a purple hoodie, carrying a worn backpack. She stepped into a closed library vestibule, looked up at the surveillance camera, and waved. Then she sat down and waited. By midnight, agents had moved in and found Kara Griggs, age 43, alive, silent, and holding a notebook labeled Final Evaluation, Preparedness for Re-Entry. April 11th, 2024. Location, Paragon, Utah. The voice on the message was faint, tinny, warped slightly by the years, but unmistakably female. Older now, shaky, but still threaded with something unmistakable beneath it. Resolve. I never died. I just waited too long. The message had been left on the voicemail of Laurel Dunn, the real estate agent who found the sealed room. Timestamp, April 3rd, 2024, 4:12 p.m. Caller ID, blocked. She'd nearly deleted it. But then she heard the name. This is Kara. I lived in the second room, the one with no window, the one with a bolt. Laurel had frozen in her kitchen, phone against her ear, heart pounding. I know you found it. You have questions. I can answer some, but not all. Some things were taught in silence, and some are still too loud in my head. Click. That was all. Now the voicemail sat on a jump drive, evidence bagged and tagged, in the Paragon Police Department's digital unit. Forensic analysis confirmed the voice was a 98.2% match to Kara's childhood recordings, a near-perfect biometric fingerprint. But the more chilling discovery came next. The timestamp on the voicemail matched the moment the FBI team was en route to the Glenwood Springs Library, just 42 minutes before she was found waiting in the vestibule. Edelyn Roy sat across from Kara in the hospital's secure psychological unit. The walls were soft beige. The air smelled faintly of sanitizer and fabric softener. Kara wore plain gray sweats. Her long brown hair had been freshly washed, braided down her back. She sat with perfect posture, hands folded on the table, a composition notebook in front of her. The label read, Transcript Submission 001, by request. Did you leave the voicemail? Edelyn asked gently. Kara looked up with calm, glassy eyes. I did. Why? Because I knew someone had finally opened the door, she replied. The one that was supposed to stay closed. Edelyn paused. Why you? Kara tilted her head slightly. I was the last. The others didn't meet the standard. A long silence. Did you believe in it? Edelyn asked. Kara's eyes didn't flinch. I still do. Later that day, forensic psychiatrist Dr. Yvonne Phelps met with Edelyn in a quiet corner of the hospital's west wing. She exhibits perfectionistic delusion reinforced by chronic reward-based conditioning, Dr. Phelps said. She genuinely believes that the abuse she endured was earned, and that survival was a result of academic success. "She's not angry?" Edelin asked. "No," Phelps replied. "She's apologetic. She believes she failed the program by getting caught. She made the call. She wanted to be found. Maybe, or maybe it was just the final assignment, to see if her training was complete." They recovered the answering machine, too, an old Panasonic model, found in the shed at the Colorado cabin, stored in a taped-up box. Inside the memory chip, 23 voicemails, each left by Kara, each labeled with a lesson name. Assignment Review, Module 4. Report on Melanie, Negative Conduct. Request for Curriculum Reinforcement, Week 9. She had been calling into a dead machine for years, repeating lesson reviews, begging for course corrections, reporting her own failures. The last message, dated March 30th, 2024, was different. Final assessment completed. I believe I am ready. I am capable of reintegration. Please advise. There was no response. That same night, back in Paragon, the county's IT clerk reviewed old call logs from the Langley residence. A hard drive from 2002 had been pulled from storage during a systems upgrade and not examined since. On it, they found fragments of 2 transferred voicemails sent to a private number in Idaho. The first, Melanie's voice. "I messed up. I took the books without asking. He said I need remediation. What does that mean?" The second, Kara. "Melanie's progress is slowing. She needs structure. She's struggling with the testing window." It was a report, filed student to instructor. Kara had been made not just a student. She had been made a monitor, a witness to the others. Edelin sat in her car long after dark that evening, gripping the wheel until her knuckles ached. The pieces of the puzzle had begun to cut back. The girls had been tested, isolated, evaluated, and when they faltered, they vanished, sealed in silence and justified by lesson plans. It wasn't about education. It was about control through obedience, perfectionism weaponized, fear rebranded as discipline, and the final lesson, perhaps the most twisted of all: be so perfect they never question the cage. April 12th, 2024. Location: Glenwood Springs. Colorado. Kara Griggs sat across from Edelin Roy in the quiet room at the Trauma Recovery Center, staring through the two-way mirror. Her posture remained pristine, shoulders aligned, chin high, feet together. But her hands fidgeted now, twisting the drawstrings of her hoodie in slow, precise loops. "I'm told you've written something," Edelin said gently. Kara nodded once. She slid a notebook across the table, the corners worn, the cover bent inward like it had been opened and closed thousands of times. Final evaluation, reintegration readiness, Kara G. Edelin opened it. The pages weren't full of reflections. They were rubrics, hand-drawn charts, scales from 1 to 10, each column labeled with a trait: composure retention, adaptability, deference, cleanliness, tone regulation, and one line across the top of every page: failure = reassignment or containment, success = advancement. "Who taught you this?" Edelin asked. Kara's eyes flicked toward the corner of the ceiling. Then she whispered, "Mr. C. Edelin blinked. "You mean Mr. R, don't you?" Kara shook her head. "Mr. R was the first phase. Mr. C came later, C for correction." She tapped the edge of the notebook. "He replaced the ones who didn't follow protocol, after Melanie, after the error." "Error?" Edelin asked. "You mean her death?" Kara looked down. Her voice was thin. She was disruptive, couldn't focus. She broke protocol. That's why he said she was reassigned. Edelin leaned forward. "But she died. You know that now, right?" Silence. Kara stared at her lap. "If I say that," she whispered, "I lose my advancement." 2 hours later, Edelin met with Dr. Yvonne Phelps again. "She's fractured," Phelps said. Not in the traditional sense. She's cognitively sharp, hyperliterate, exceptionally organized, but morally compartmentalized. Trauma logic has rewired her entire understanding of safety and achievement. She thinks she deserved the cage, Edelin said. Phelps nodded. She doesn't remember freedom, only hierarchy. Meanwhile, the search for Earl Ridner, aka Mr. C, had reached a critical turn. His last known movements ended outside a wildlife reserve near the Utah border. His vehicle was abandoned near a fire road. Inside, Kara's old textbooks, a pair of pink gloves, and a suicide note, unsigned, written on notebook paper. She advanced. The program succeeded. I am no longer required. But no body was ever found. And the cabin's second ventilation shaft had a tunnel, a crawl space, dug by hand, and it led away. In Glenwood Springs, the center allowed Kara access to limited comforts, a hairbrush, a digital voice recorder, a new notebook, but she used them the same way she always had, as tools for tracking compliance. At night, staff found her copying out passages from academic texts she'd memorized long ago. By day 3, she had reconstructed a full AP biology syllabus. Edelin returned on the 5th day. Kara sat waiting, backpack on the floor beside her. I want to request conditional placement, Kara said before Edelin could speak. Sheltered housing, independent study, access to a test site. You mean for college? Kara nodded. I missed my window in 2001, but I'm still viable for testing. GED equivalency, maybe a junior college transfer. I can still be useful. Edelin's heart broke a little. Kara, she said softly, you are useful. You're not a student in a program anymore. You're a person who was hurt, who survived something no one should ever have survived. Kara's lips pressed together. But if I don't finish the assignment, what was the point? That night, the center staff found a new note taped to Kara's door. Day 5. Requesting consideration for auditory silence voices during meal hour are distracting. Recommend minimizing casual interaction to maintain task focus. Signed, KG, Level 4. The next morning, Kara was gone. The bed was made, the room spotless. Her notebook and voice recorder had been left behind, and taped to the mirror was a single sheet of paper. One sentence. Final evaluation incomplete. Self-administering Phase 5. She was found 22 hours later, near a college library, sitting outside, waiting. In her lap, a course catalog. In her pocket, an essay titled, Why I Am Ready. She handed it to the responding officer and said, Tell Dr. Phelps I'm still willing to finish. May 1st, 2024. Location unknown. The room was quiet, not the silence of neglect, but the cultivated hush of institutional stillness. A single desk, a lamp, a stack of legal documents bound by a red ribbon. On the windowsill sat a composition notebook, its cover faded, the corners fraying. Inside, the final page had been filled. May 1st. Assessment complete. There is no second door. There never was. The test was survival. The price was self. They taught me how to speak so well, I forgot how to scream. KG Kara Griggs now lives under a monitored care program in the outskirts of Boulder, Colorado. She's not a prisoner. She's not entirely free either. She has her own apartment in a converted educational facility where she receives therapy, support, and supervised autonomy. She attends community college 3 days a week. She keeps her own schedule, written in color-coded ink. She cooks her own meals. She reads 3 books per week. And every morning she still makes her bed with military precision. Every night she brushes her teeth for exactly 2 minutes. Every Sunday she writes a progress report, though no one requires it anymore. The search for Earl Ridner, aka Mr. C, continues. His body has never been found. Interpol believes he may have fled under a new identity. Others believe he never existed in the traditional sense, that Mr. C was a composite, A mask worn by multiple men across time, each one reinforcing the system. The Colorado bunker has been demolished. The Langley house in Paragon has been permanently condemned. A memorial plaque now stands in its place, etched with the names of the known victims. Megan Griggs, Melanie Rivas, Andrea Myers, Talia Venn, and beneath them, others, still unnamed, still missing. Edelyn Roy still visits Kara once a month. Sometimes they sit in silence. Sometimes they talk about books. Once, Kara asked if Edelyn ever studied piano. "I did," Edelyn said. "Did you quit?" "I got tired of being told I was flat." Kara smiled at that. A real one, small but real. In her newest notebook, Kara has begun a memoir. The title is scribbled across the first page in sharp black ink. The basement had 2 doors, but the subtitle is what catches the eye. Only one was meant to open.